Hi everyone, and thanks for joining today. Today we're going to be discussing a super exciting topic, how self-performing work gives Janes Corporation a competitive edge, as well as how they're managing all of this work in Procore alongside the rest of their project information. My name is Haley Odell, and I am the host for today's session and coming to you from Santa Barbara, California. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment and remind you that throughout Groundbreak, we're going to be sharing some really cool new features not generally available. So just please make sure that your purchasing decisions are based on what's available today. So on that note, let's begin. Today, we're going to discuss why this topic is important. We're going to give you some background on Janes, the evolution of their company, and why they decided to self-perform. Then we're going to share some best practices for setting this work up in Procore. Sound good? All right. Today, we have Taryn and Andrew from Janes Corporation. Taryn is the operations support director there, responsible for Janes' strategic approach to technology, process improvement, and performance monitoring through data and analytics. And Andrew, who's the director of self-perform operations at Janes, and he's in charge of managing and planning ongoing and future projects, as well as coordinating all the expectations between GCs, subs, suppliers, owners, architects, interior designers, internal teams, pretty much everyone. And something that you can see that's not in their bios that I just want to mention today is they are also just super awesome humans. And I think it's just such a huge testament to the culture over at Janes. So I just want to say it's truly a pleasure to work with both of you. And I feel really lucky that we get to help highlight all of the work that you do. So that being said, let's kick it off. Today, we're talking about this topic because the reality of the construction industry is low margins and high risk. And that's not the ideal scenario for successful business, but it is the reality of the commercial construction industry. And according to Deloitte, in order to combat these obstacles in 2021 and beyond, construction companies should consider several ways to create long-term efficiencies and other competitive advantages. One of those ways include enhancing your margins by self-performing work. So either you're here today because you currently don't self-perform and you're interested in finding out how you can create efficiencies for your business. Or two, you do self-perform and you want to figure out how to do this more efficiently. And I guess there's three, which hopefully you didn't mean to come, but we're going to put you in one of those two buckets. So if you're in the first bucket and you currently don't self-perform, contractors like yourself are typically looking for ways to combat the common challenges of maintaining a skilled labor force, control over quality and safety issues, razor-thin margins. Ultimately, they want more certainty control if their project is going to end on time and on budget. And if you fall into the second bucket, you self-perform work and you're trying to maximize these efficiencies. Contractors are typically looking for a solution that manages schedule, which is key to completing projects on time, the ability to accurately track productivity, and having real-time information into how your project is performing. So the good news, we have a customer here today who's been in both of these buckets. So in a moment, we're going to hear why Janes Corporation chose to self-perform and why it's been their secret sauce for years, allowing them to grow and take on the largest projects they have ever worked on. And also the how they've been able to improve profitability and job costing with the power of managing their jobs through Procore's platform.
All right, hey there, everyone. Thanks, Haley, for the kind words. Just wanted to start with a quick introduction of both Andrew and I, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about Janes Corporation as well. So my name is Taryn Lamoureux. I'm the Operations Support Director for Janes. I've been with Janes for 12 years, and in my role now as Ops Support Director, believe it or not, I actually support our operations. I try and do that through our project teams primarily, and really through three approaches, as Haley alluded to. Process development and improvement. I oversee our technology strategy, and most recently, the creation and monitoring of our KPIs of our operations. And then the hard part is holding the folks accountable when we're not hitting those targets. So Andrew?
Thanks, Taryn, and thanks, Haley. So my name is Andrew Cisneros, and I've been with Janes just a little over 13 years in my current role. I'm the Director of Self-Perform Operations, which I'll speak to in a little more detail later on. We're happy for the opportunity to be able to present and highlight some of the ways that our Self-Perform group has been a large part of Janes Corporation's success.
So real quick, just to give you guys an idea of who Janes is and what we're all about. We're a general contractor, but we believe we're a builder. We're serving the Southwest U.S. here in the high desert. Andrew and I are sitting in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's where our headquarters are. So we're founded in 1946, and we really got our roots in concrete work. George Janes started this company as a residential concrete firm doing residential pads, driveways, sidewalks, curb and gutter, small jobs like that. And then by the 60s, we'd grown into the largest commercial concrete contractor in the state. We've continued growing, and today I can confidently say that we are the premier concrete contractor in New Mexico. In the 70s, we became licensed as a general contractor, and from then we really saw a lot of growth with our revenue, and that today still remains our largest source of revenue for the company. Another key trait about Jane's is the fact that we self-perform our own millwork as well. Interesting story there that Andrew will talk on a little bit later, but got to start doing form work for our concrete operation back in the 80s and has grown now into a full-service fab and install group. One more thing I want to make sure that we communicate to you guys that I'd be remiss if I didn't say is just the fact that Jane's is 100% employee owned, and being an ESOP really drives and shapes our culture here. We've got this culture that's founded in growth. If we could sum it up in one word, the word would be raise. So we want to raise leaders from within our ranks here at Jane's. We literally want to raise our buildings up out of the ground for our clients. And lastly, and probably most importantly, we really want to help raise healthy communities for our families to thrive in. In order to do all of that, we have to remain in business. And in order to remain in business, we got to deal with risk, just like all contractors. So as a contractor, risk comes in a heck of a lot of different ways. There's always present dangers to our safety and our health on site and the bodily injury that can occur there. We've got tighter project schedules, and we're doing projects faster than we ever have. We've got highly scrutinized budgets, and they're more visible than they've ever been. More competition's coming into our markets. And you combine all those up, and we've really seen that slowly but surely, our estimated profit margins are starting to get slimmer, as Haley mentioned. And I think that's the case for all contractors. So we're forced to go through this exercise of finding ways to offset these risks so that we can drive our results and still protect our margins. Be it 10 to 15 years ago, and yes, it's actually been that long since BIM made its splash. Some people chose BIM as a way to offset risk and improve their coordination of the projects. Other groups might have tested the waters of new project delivery methods like CMAR or design build or integrated project deliveries. Even like us, and probably most of you guys listening here, we invested in softwares like Procore to help drive communication, improve our efficiencies. And at Jane's, we've done all of those. We've done all of those that I just mentioned. But the biggest thing I think that we're doing to really help us enhance those margins and drive our results is we remain rooted as a builder who self-performs these choice scopes of work that I'm going to let Andrew talk about now.
Our building and site concrete operation and our architectural casework and millwork operation. To start, a quickly overview of our millwork operation. As Terrence said, we started building form work for our concrete operation in the 80s and have grown into what is now a full-service fabrication and install operation. We have about 30 employees, and we do our own engineering, fabrication, logistics, and install. Our projects range in size from just a few $1,000s up to our largest project, which is about $7 million in revenue, which is a project we did here locally in Albuquerque for a high-end hospitality and gaming customer that we typically work with. Our concrete group is larger, both in number and volume. This year, our revenue for our concrete operation will top out at around 25 million. We have about 55 to 60 employees full-time in that concrete operation. And we take pride in the longevity of our employees, and their loyalty shows. We have people that are with us 35 to 40 years, and it's always been a staple. Taryn mentioned that we choose to self-perform to improve our results and offset the risks of the market we find ourselves in. While that is true, it is a little more layered than just that. You can break that down into a little more detail. First, not only are we builders, but we are also developers of people. Our self-perform operation serves as fertile training ground for future leaders who within our organization. A handful of our senior leadership got their start wearing their bags. In fact, one of our executives started out in the field about 31 years ago as a laborer. Another reason we self-perform is because of the influence it allows us to have on our project schedules. We help push the project right out of the ground, literally, and our millwork group is able to come through at the end and finish strong through all the finished process. By being out in the field, our guys not only set the tone for schedule and flow, but also for quality and safety. We believe we serve as good examples for other trade partners when they see the height of the bar and expectations we've set for ourselves. Lastly, getting more work under contract helps enhance our profit. The risk is high for our self-perform operations, but it might be even higher for us as a company if we chose not to take on the work. It is something that we're glad to do and have a heck of a good time doing it.
So real briefly, before we jump into the meat and potatoes, I just want to share what Procore tools that we're using here at James, because we get asked that quite a bit. We started with Procore in March of 2018, and at that time we purchased all the tools that Procore had available to us. And I'd say that the largest selling point was the work and the progress that Procore had made on the timesheets and the field productivity tools. We were really interested in all of that. Today, we're still using all those same tools that we initially purchased, but we've also added Procore Analytics to our arsenal. And we'll talk a little bit more about Procore Analytics later. So with all of that said, sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we wanted to use a real concrete example, no pun intended there for that one, of what a self-perform project looks like at Janes, how we're leveraging that self-perform scope to enhance our margins, and lastly, how Procore is actually helping us do all of it. So as I talk, feel free to take a look at the video that's playing in the background. This is a project we're currently working on right now. It's for a large healthcare provider here in the Southwest. It's a 320,000 square foot hospital tower addition to their main campus that you can kind of see in the background. Presently speaking, this is the largest project we've ever done at Janes, both on our general contracting side, and it's the biggest concrete scope that we've ever performed, with the contract for the concrete group being just under $20 million. The tower is 9 stories with 2 sublevels for a total of 11 stories, and includes 120 new patient beds. In addition to the tower, we're also performing a large utility upgrade that's required to support a hospital of this magnitude. The tower on the concrete side, the tower consists of an all cast in place structure, as you can see. It features a foundation made up of large grade beams, pier caps. And as we go up through the rest of the vertical structure, we're looking at shear walls and columns all cast in place, as well as a mix between slab types. We've got some double cambered slabs, as well as some post-tension reinforced slabs in this structure. So some quick numbers: we have a total of 23,000 cubic yards of concrete in the hospital, and from our estimate, we've got about 48,000 man hours that are going to be required to build it.
To help us ensure success, we knew that productivity tracking needed to be a big part of the solution. Here are a few points that we were going through regarding the planning and setup for controls on this project. First off, schedule. As it is the case with most hospitals, the schedule, completion, and first patient date are always key. With this being a cast-in-place structure, we knew that the large majority of this work was going to fall through the critical path of the concrete scope in this project. Other than the traditional method of updating a schedule with remaining duration for each activity, we wanted some additional validation that we were on track, so we wanted a report that showed percent complete based on units installed as well. With this, we could cross-reference the projected completion date from the schedule with percent complete based on units to get a clear picture of the schedule. Next, productivity. Not only did we want to make sure that we were on track with the overall project schedule for our GC side, we also wanted to make sure that we were installing the work within our estimated number of man hours from the budget. If you're using it, you know how powerful Procore's field production report is in letting you know if you are ahead or behind your estimated production rates. And lastly, more information, faster. If we want to be successful in this project, we have to know in real time how we're doing. It is not good enough to wait until the end of the project to see where the dust settles and to know if we've won or lost. And it's not even quick enough to wait for a week for accounting or labor to be posted on cost for the job. So again, Procore's field productivity tool gives us the insight we need immediately upon timesheet and quantity input on a daily basis.
Okay, so now let's get into some of the details of how we're actually making all of this happen, kind of our game plan here. So as Andrew just mentioned, we want to know how we're doing in real time and if we are winning or if we're losing at that exact moment. We don't want to have to wait. So if we have all that information, if we know we're winning or if we know we're losing, we can make some pretty powerful decisions. We can identify what needs to be improved to meet rates, or if we're doing really good on our rates, we can say, hey, we need to keep doing what we're doing. So to do this, we employed a strategy that really involved chunking down some pretty big scopes of work into smaller bite-sized pieces. Still pretty big bites, but smaller, more manageable pieces. So to bring a little bit of context, earlier when I was describing the scope of this project, you heard me mention columns and shear walls. In the past, on a project like this, we would have had a budget with the corresponding cost codes for all of the columns on the project, and likewise for all of the shear walls on the project. Maybe we would have broke it down into forming and placing, but either way, the fact remains that we would not have had a definitive answer whether we made money or we lost money on those activities until they were actually done, which in this case, on a project of this size, it would be like 10 to 12 months, which is just way too long. It's unacceptable. So what we've done is we've developed a plan that really breaks down all those columns on these 11 floors that you're seeing here on this slide, to make it a little bit more manageable. So here on this slide, what you see is a plan view of one of the floors. This is the 7th floor on this example. That's actually where we're working currently. It's a little tough to see, but highlighted in yellow are the vertical components of the structure. It's the shear walls and the columns. We broke out the vertical structure first by floor, so floors sub-level 1 all the way up through level 9. From there, we broke each floor out by the 3 components: shear walls, columns, slabs. Each of those we then broke out into forming and placing. So as you can see, for each floor, we ended up with a cost code configuration, kind of like you see on the left here, where we've got level 7 columns forming, level 7 columns placing, etc. This pattern, it's repeated all the way up through the structure of the hospital. And each of those cost codes holds the budgeted number of hours that we have from the estimate and the budgeted quantities for that specific piece of work from our estimate. So here's a photo of some of the actual columns and shear walls on the 7th floor that we were just looking at. This strategy I've described now gives our foreman Tyler and Eric here, who you can see in this picture stripping some of the forms, great insight into what they did last week when they have those rates. Or heck, if they entered the timesheets and the quantities that day, they can actually see if they won or lost on the rate that very day. We can then take those lessons and capitalize them on the next floor, right? This is a repetitive structure, so we can say, hey, this really worked well on level 6. Let's make sure we do it on level 7 as well. It took an extremely large effort at the beginning of this project for Andrew and his team to break out this large scope into all these bite-sized pieces, create the cost codes, figure out the hours and the quantities associated with each of them. But it's an exercise that's bearing a lot of fruit and proving to be well worth the time.
If there's one thing that can really keep the strategy from working, it would be an old adage you have all heard before: junk in equals junk out. With that in mind, we know that we would need a pretty tight process to ensure that the actual timesheet hours and installed quantities being recorded are correct, because the accuracy of the data is so critical. We leverage Procore's 3-tiered timesheet approval process to get the right folks looking at the data inputs. A brief summary of the workflow goes just like this. First off, Tyler, our foreman, uses the cruise tool and the bulk entry feature of the timesheets to enter in all the cruise hours and cost codes worked for that specific day. Next, our field engineer quantifies what was installed that day for each of those activities and cost codes. Then he adds the quantities to the timesheets. These activities, we're generally working in square feet or cubic yards. After the hours and quantities are entered, our project manager will look over what was entered, and if he agrees, he will mark them as reviewed. And lastly, after the timesheets are marked, reviewed by the PM, our general superintendent does the final approval before they head the payroll. This might seem burdensome, but the devil really is in the details when it comes into this data. So just as a reminder, the scrutiny of this workflow is twofold. Number one, to ensure everyone gets paid timely and correctly. And number two, to ensure that the data getting entered is accurate, so we don't make any false assumptions regarding what our rates are telling us.
So workflows can be a little bit boring, and that cost code strategy can be a little bit boring. So if there is a sexy side of all of this, this is it. So hold on to your shorts. This is the culmination of all of this work, the rates and the reports that are the functions of all of the hard work that we just talked about. So as I said early, the beauty of field productivity is the real-time immediate insights that we can get. Because once all of these steps are done, and those steps would be entering the budgeted hours, entering the budgeted quantities from our estimate, and then recording the actual hours and the actual quantities on our timesheets, we can finally see the rates that we're achieving compared to what we budgeted. At Jane's, we really want to get as many eyes on this data as we can, So we make it accessible not only to our foremen. They're probably most key that they're looking at this data because they're the ones impacting the rates. But we want our PMs to see it, our soups, our estimators, middle management, and even sometimes our executives like looking at these reports and seeing what our rates are doing from time to time. On this slide, you can see how the data actually comes across for our folks that are using the mobile application. We view these numbers in a pretty logical way, in the same logical way that Procore produces them. We start with the man-hour data. So how many hours were budgeted, how many hours have we actually used, and how many are remaining. So take a look at the shear walls on this snapshot. It's the third cost code down. Our estimate tells us that we have just under 1,300 hours to perform all that work. To date, we've used 175 hours, and we have 1,100 or so left to finish that activity. Once we look at the hours, we move on and we look at the quantities that we've done. So it's very similar manner to the way we look at the hours. What was budgeted, what's been installed. For this example, on the shear walls, we have 3,100 square feet of shear walls that we have to put in place, and we've actually installed 1,200 so far. So then lastly, the love child of both of these numbers, if you want to call it that, it's the rate, right? It's really pretty simple. It's a simple mathematical function of the quantities over the time. So the budgeted quantities over the budgeted time and the actual quantities over the actual time. For example, square footage of shear walls per man hour. It's an example that we'll look at here. So Procore calculates what our rate should be based on what we put in and tells us what we need to hit in order to meet our estimate. Then it also tells us based on what we put in actually, they'll tell us what rate we're hitting. So take a look at the shear walls. We needed to be at 2.4 square feet formed per hour. Currently, we're installing that at a rate of 7 square feet per hour. Tyler and Eric and all the boys out there are killing it on that cost code. So it's a pretty simple report, but it's so powerful what it's telling us because it's real time. You got to remember it's real time. And the green is good. If you see red, it's bad. It means we're not hitting our rate. And the gray just indicates that we have not started those activities yet. So you're probably already starting to see the power that these numbers can bring and how a project team can leverage them in pursuit of the success on the project. And as I mentioned, we're doing this because we hope that we can drive improvements on the activities that are behind and that we can learn from our successes on the activities that are really excelling. So those are the basic reports that we just looked at that come out of the box with Procore. However, we have access to even more robust and more powerful insights through our usage of Procore Analytics that I mentioned. Analytics is still pretty new to us at Janes. We've only had it for about a year or so. So we're not as far along on that journey as we are with the field productivity stuff, but we can start to see a pretty clear picture of a path forward in the future. So with analytics, we can now start to level activities from one project to another. Our estimators, they can take those combined rates, those average rates across multiple projects, and they can understand what a realistic estimated rate should be going forward. Across the timeline of a project is what we're looking at here. We can see what our rate did from 1 month to another or 1 week to another. And then if we have that information, we say, what was happening on site that day? Was weather a factor? Were we short a couple of guys? What were the conditions that were in play that really impacted our rate? And Procore is even starting to get into machine learning and starting to tell us what are the biggest contributing factors to our success, and then vice versa, what factors are in play that are eating away at our rates. So to put a bow on this whole process, I want to take you back to one of the other tools we use in Procore. It would be the budget tool. Once we complete an activity and all the quantities are 100%, it's done. There are really only two scenarios. We either made money or we lost money. So in either of those cases, we wrap up that activity with the budget mod in or out of that cost code. If we beat the budget, we're moving that excess money to fee, which is a good thing, or to our internal contingencies. And if we came under, we're moving money. We got to go through that painful exercise of moving money out of fee or moving money out of our internal contingency to fill up that gap that we had in the shortfall. So in addition to utilizing Procore Analytics, comparing the final cost that we see in the budget to the original budgets is really a great tool to provide feedback to our estimating team as well. So here as we start to wrap up and kind of wind down, you, like my boss, might be asking, okay, what's next? Where are we headed next? How are we going to push this? Well, if you're paying attention to the product keynote, you might have heard something that we're pretty excited about. It's the work breakdown structures. I believe it's in beta now. The current way we are creating custom cost codes into these manageable pieces that I explained, it's great. but it doesn't come without some limitations and some issues. So because we have all these different cost codes on each project, we have a hard time automating a report that will level one activity against the same activity on another project. So for example, on project A, columns might be 030101, and on project B, the cost code might be 030102 for the same activity. So it makes it difficult to compare what our column production would be from one project to another. The advent of the work breakdown structure that's coming out, it will allow us to maintain our standard cost codes, just one cost code for columns, and then utilize the WBS to break down the work into smaller bite-sized pieces to manage it more effectively. So it's constant improvements like this that Procore is doing that are the exact reason why we here at Janes are really happy to partner with somebody like Procore. They care enough to listen to real issues from real people on real projects. This picture here is a real project. Andrew is a real person managing this project. If you drive down I-25 in Albuquerque, you will see it going up right now. And Procore listens to these issues that we have, and they go out, they find the solutions, and they make it happen. So they operate a lot like us, just with different issues. So it makes for a pretty natural partnership between us and Procore, and we're just happy to have the opportunity to be a part of it and to share our story. So thanks so much, Haley. I'll pass it back to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Taryn and Andrew. That was such an awesome story of Janes, and it's just such great call outs for how you're doing that today in Procore. So bringing it back to y'all, if you don't self-perform, I hope today you're able to gain insight into why contractors are choosing to self-perform, which includes gaining highly valuable trade partners, increasing the quality and safety of your job, becoming more efficient, and creating more certainty into your schedule and budget. And if you do, I hope today that you're able to give insight into how you can be putting your self-perform work in Procore and ultimately make the most of your efficiencies gained. And that's all because the future not only guarantees the need for efficiency and productivity enhancing strategies, but also connected construction technology. And we hope to partner with you on this journey. So just big thank you for joining us today. I hope that you have an awesome day and an awesome rest of Groundbreak.